Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. If we can all start from Mike, who is going to keep good order tonight. Well, he's going to try and keep good order. It's that might be some difficulty, so I'm going to pass over to Mike, who will pass on to someone else. Mike, over to you.
Great, lovely to see you all here again. We are few, but that doesn't mean that the quality is ever low. I see some very close friends, and I see someone who is a stranger to me, which is Baba C. So you're from Somalia, Swahili?
No, I use Swahili in my workshops. I'm from Washington, D.C. in the United States.
Now, the world is split into three. So it's what is ours, what was ours, and what should have been ours.
Okay.
I heard that from Dan Kedding, who was a very close American storytelling friend of mine. He told me that all those years ago. So the way we do things here is I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Keith is going to go first. If you will go second, that will be fine. Then John, you go third. And just for once, this is my granddaughter Lacey, and she's 7 years old, and she's had her birthday present today because we missed 2 birthdays because of the lockdown.
Ah!
She has been riding a horse, and we'll put some pictures up on Facebook at some point. Anyway, I've been indulgent enough by introducing everybody, so I'm going to, without further ado, introduce Lincolnshire, which is the other side of the country from where I am in Shropshire. But Keith, my old friend, is going to start off by telling us a story.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. I went down, I did my breakfast, and I went out of my front door and I went into the garden. And there's this awful noise at the bottom of the garden, all this squawking and all this screeching. And there's all these birds, and they're all arguing with one another. And they were saying, "I'm the king of the birds. I'm the king of the birds." And there's a magpie there saying, "Well, I'm the king of the birds." And there's a stork saying, "Well, I've got the longest legs, so I'm the king of the birds." And they're arguing among themselves and say, well, and so they had to come to a solution. So the owl, the wise old owl, said that the bird that can fly the highest, it will be the king of the birds. And they all agreed. And so the cockerel went cock-a-doodle-doo, and he flew up to the top of the barn's roof, said, "I'm the king of the birds, cock-a-doodle-doo." But then there was the stork with his long legs and big arms, and he flew up into the highest tree. He said, "I am the king of the birds." And then there was the skylark, and it was twittering away and singing away and said, "I am the king of the birds." And one after another, they all were claiming to be king of the birds, trying to fly the highest, until high on the thermals was the golden eagle, resting and flying on the thermals. "I am the king of the birds." "Oh, no, you're not. Oh, no, you're not." And there's this little wren. It was just flying, fluttering just above the eagle. And the eagle said, "How do you get there?" "I stowed under your left wing and stowed a lift up into there. And so I'm now flying higher than you, higher than you. I am the king of the birds." And the eagle tried to grab with his claws at the wren, but the wren just dodged away. And so they all flew down. The eagle gliding down to the earth, and the wren fluttering down like this. And they're in the garden. And the wren was saying, I'm the king of the birds because I flew the highest. But the eagle said, oh, he was a cheat because he stowed his way under my wing. A cheat, a cheat, a cheat, a cheat, a cheat, so they all said. And they all gathered round the wren, wanting to not know what to do with it. And the blackbird said, we will drown the wren. And so, in the hedgerow, the blackbird found a cup, but they had no water to put in it. And so the blackbird cried into the cup, plop, plop, plop. And then the blue tit came along and it cried into the cup, plop, plop, plop. And the stork came along and it cried into the cup, plop, plop, plop. And all the time, the owl had organised this competition, was holding the cup very carefully. And then the thrush came along and it cried into the cup, plop, 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 until the cup was nearly full, ready to drown the wren. But the owl that was holding the cup with its claw just slipped and the cup tipped over and all these tears flowed all over the grass and were lost. And all the birds turned onto the owl and said, you clumsy bird! And they chased the owl and the owl flew off into the twilight and into the darkness, chased by all these other birds. And that is why you'll only see the owl at twilight flying over the hedgerows and over the dikes hunting, for fear of being chased by the other birds. And you'll find in the hedgerows, there's the wren, the king of the birds.
Very well done. Thank you. Right, Barbara, I'm going to change the batting order because Jackie has asked if she could go second because she's got to rush off somebody else. So if we're going to go Jackie, Barbara next, okay, and then John up.
No problemo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Baba. David and I are going to do a story together. And as I say, I have to go tonight. So I'll catch your story on Facebook later. Or, yeah. Right, David, are you ready? David's not going to show his face tonight because you're going to have to listen very carefully as he tells his tale. You'll need to unmute, so David.
David, you need to unmute, mate. There we go.
He's nearly there.
No. David, that's it.
There,
David.
no,
Okay.
that's it. Sorted. I'm ready when you are. You ready? Are you having a problem? Okay, that's fine.
Good.
Ready?
I've read it now. Enough.
I'm ready.
Hello?
You go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Okay, David, get started.
That dove I keep on me the order okay. Them that are doing that are not the lockdown.
This story is a gift from me to all those who give their music and storytelling online during lockdown.
I want that for the modern doing.
I want to say thank you for your amazing music and stories.
That were at my mother at the all that animal go far out the little emotion.
There was once a man playing music outside. All the animals came from far and wide to listen to his music.
That don't go far. The echo from the air go far. Matador. I back go far at the other world.
The dolphin came from the distant sea. The eagle came from the high mountain top. The bear came from out of the woods.
When lockdown comes, at the other world at the bay, it the made but also I do that made for everything. So low it got to be the down it down.
When lockdown came, he hung his guitar on the wall and stopped playing. He saw many people playing on YouTube and thought they were amazing, but he felt so low he couldn't bring himself to take down his guitar.
That what I now is I what added what do added the more at
Then one of his friends rang him and asked him what was happening. "Why haven't you played your guitar for months?" asked his friend.
I have voted that voted vote like my mother everybody.
"I'm worried that people won't like my music," he replied.
If I do not need the all or do better, don't let go. The mother is the better.
His friend said, "You need to hold on to your passion. Don't let it go. Your music is your passion."
Do other for everybody. I think that all back again.
"You're absolutely right," he replied, and he took his guitar off the wall and played again.
The go back.
He felt the joy come back.
Everybody do it automatic autumn. Even at bad mountain.
His friend gave him a link to his open mic session on Zoom, and he went and played music.
That the body we put the wow that was made. What I put the mountain.
The chat was buzzing and people were saying, "Wow, that was amazing. What a beautiful song. Thank you for sharing your music."
Don't about the go. I wanted the other in me. I let it but not day. Oh, look, emoji, little boy out. I even it.
Soon he found different Zoom music groups and a wonderful thing happened. he met a lady from the United States. She loved his music and listened for hours as he played his songs.
Why repeat the letter? That was amazing. The doing.
When he finished, the lady said, "That was amazing. You should tell stories."
Oh, doing that over by doing much like doing.
"No, I can't do that," he replied. "Oh, you need to try," she insisted. "Your music is like a story."
Try to get on at the battle of mountain at the autumn. To la autumn.
They talked together all night and again the next day. They shared their passion for music and stories on Zoom, just like I do.
Try to get all the little me the doing for the doing. Our the mommy the all the battle.
So thank you again, all of you, for letting me tell my stories and for sharing your stories and music. I want to remind the world to hold on to passion. Thank you, David.
Well done, David.
That was brilliant.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah, okay.
It's
Macy's got to
amazing,
go. I'm
David.
just going to say goodbye to Lacey. Okay, fine. Well done, David. And I expect to see you here in 2 weeks' time, and don't be late. And I expect you to have another story. Okay. Or I want a sick note.
Oh.
Okay? Right, I did.
Brilliant. I love this. I love it when storytellers come together and share stories. This is brilliant. So bravo, asante sana, which is Swahili for very well done. And no, I'm not fluent in Swahili. I just know a lot of phrases.
Go away, the I got did doing.
Oh yes, David is going to have a very special story on the 10th of May. I'm sure John will mention it at the end, okay? Thank you all for listening. I have to dash, I'm sorry, but I'll catch all.
No, dash. You're blessed to be able to dash. Now, I just have one question. Is it Jordash
Jackie. No,
or DoorDash?
If you're
My
heading
dash.
for a pub, have a right, Jackie. If you're heading for a pub, you just have a gin and tonic with us, okay?
We're not
And then
allowed
I'm
to
going
go to
Dave-
we're not allowed to go to pubs in Scotland yet.
Ah,
Tomorrow.
I always thought it was a second-rate country.
Oh, I'm leaving now.
Until the next time,
Bye. Thanks.
to be
Ollie.
continued.
Jackie, I'm going to Wales tomorrow. They've got the same thing. They're opening their pubs up in Wales tomorrow.
There you
With the
go.
French called Pays de Gaulle.
I
have
can
many
see you're
friends
going.
there, and it's
So
called
you're
a
going
bit
for
of
some
ban-
quality beer tomorrow then.
yeah, and some quality people,
Of course,
Okay.
that goes without saying.
and we have a thing called banter. Anyway, Baba, I'll let you go. Okay, mate. Thank you,
Oh, hey.
David.
Fine. First of all, and I mean this in the kindest way, I want to give a round of applause to the silver and white manes among us. And someone once asked me, one of my students once asked me, because my beard used to be full of salt and pepper, but now it's mostly salt. But one of my students asked me, how did your beard get so gray? How did you get all that gray? And my oldest son was standing beside me. He said, he raised me. Yeah. And he was right. Okay, so Keith, your story reminded me of a story, but I'm not going to tell that one right now. And David and Janet, wait a minute, I'll make sure you told the story together, right? No, the one that just left told the story that was. See, my brain, I got the attention of a TC fly. I have the attention of a TC fly. But anyhow, they reminded me of a story, a great story that I love to tell, but I'm not telling that story today either. But I am telling the story about the king of numbers. And when this story was first told, it was told a long time ago. I can hold it longer, but it'll look like I froze. So anyhow, a long time ago, there was a king named Simba. Simba means lion. So Oba Simba, King Simba. And King Simba was loved by the people in his Kijiji, in his village, because he was very, very kind, very, very good. He looked out after everyone. Everyone had a place to stay. Everyone had food for their belly. Everyone was doing well. In the village of King Oba, if you made an effort, you lived well. But Simba was growing old, as we must do. And he knew soon he'd be joining the ancestors. So he decided that he wanted to make sure the people in his village, the Watu Wazuri, the beautiful people in his village, were taken care of long after he joined the ancestors. So he devised a plan. And he sent for one of his trusty servants, and he said, I need you to go and shout throughout the village for everyone to come to my compound, to come to my home, to come to see the king. And so he did. He shouted, come to the king's village, come to the king's compound, come to the king's home, come to the king's courtyard. He has something very important to tell us, tell us, tell us, tell us, tell us. And so all the people gathered around. Now this is before man came into being, and all the animals were the first people. So the animals, the giraffe was there, the gorilla was there, the elephant was there. All the animals gathered around and gathered around and gathered around. Because why gather a square? Anyhow, all the people, they gathered around, and the King Simba said, my beautiful people, soon I will join the ancestors. But when I am gone, I want to make sure that everyone is taken care of. So I am going to open the royal coffers. And I want you to think about how much manila, which is a gold coin, how much manila you want. And when I point to you, and the treasurer points to you, you tell him how much manila you want. And he will make it so. And so everybody thought, I want everybody to think right now. Okay. So, all the animals, they were thinking about how much manila they want. And so they asked, they went around. And one animal said, I want 100 manila. Another animal said, I want 40 million manila. Another animal said, I want 20 manila. He was trying not to be greedy. And the tortoise, the turtle, he said, I want 1 manila. Everybody in the village looked at him and said, are you crazy? Man, what is your problem? The king is giving away manila and you only want 1? The treasurer was prepared to give out the manila. Not to be confused with vanilla. That's something else. And so, who wanted the 100,000 manila? And the elephant raised his hand. And the treasurer went 1. And the turtle stepped forward, took the 1 manila, put in his shell, got back in line. What just happened? Who wanted 20 manila? Another animal raised his hand. And the treasurer said 1. And the turtle stepped out, took the 1 manila, put in his shell, got back in line. Who wanted 40,000 manila? And the animal raised her hand, and the treasurer said 1, and the tortoise stepped out, the turtle stepped out, took the 1 manila and put it in his shell. Everyone started looking. Someone said, "What is your problem? What are you doing?" And the turtle said, "The king asked you how much manila you want. You all gave your numbers. I asked for 1 manila. Every time the treasurer say 1, I'm going to take my 1 manila." You see where this is going? By the end of the day, the turtle had collected all the manila in the Kijiji, all the manila in the village. He had so much money, he had to hire servants to help his servants take all his manila home. Well, shortly after that, a very sad thing happened. King Simba joined the ancestors. And the people in the Kijiji said, "Well, we need a new king, we need a new king." And they were trying to figure out who. They needed a new king who could step up and do the things that Oba Simba had done. And they thought about it, and they thought about it, and they thought about it. And they realized there was only one decision. They needed someone who was wise, resourceful, who could think outside of the box. And so they all decided that the turtle must be the new king. Now, I forgot to ask you a question at the beginning of the story, so I'll ask you now. If you're thinking about numbers, what is the king of numbers? Think amongst yourself. And now I shall tell you. 1 is the king of numbers. You see, it did not matter what you asked for. You must first start off with 1. Had it been bricks for making a house, the turtle would have asked for 1 brick. Had it been leaves for making the roof, the turtle would have asked for 1 leaf. For you cannot begin anything until first you have 1. So 1 is the king of numbers. Oops, I stepped on a pin, the pin bent, and that's the way that story went. Asante.
That's a lovely
So-
story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have a batting order, and the
Wow.
batting order
Thank
is going to be
That's
Right.
really good. I enjoyed that one.
Thank you.
right. We're going to go.
Where's that story go from?
Where's the story come from?
Oh, that story. Oh, wow. That story is either from Ghana or Nigeria. It gets, now since we have jets and almost instantaneous travel, a lot of stories that start out in one place are now way over in another place. So, but I believe that one started in Ghana.
Right. Stories do travel all over the world, Baba, but nowadays they travel just quickly. The stories
Yeah,
used to
they
travel.
travel. Oh, yeah.
Travel just a bit slower. So I'm going to have a batting order, and it's going to go John, Valentina, Phil, Janet, but I'm going to do a story. So you fellas get a chance to get the batting order in place. So it's going to be me, John, Valentina, Phil, Janet. Okay, is that everybody clear on that? So you go after me, John. Okay, mate? All right, here we go. That's a tune from here, Shropshire. And Shropshire, if you think of England and Wales, we're halfway up on the English side, and then there's the Welsh border, then there's the Wales over there. And there's a place called the Wenlock Edge that goes across the top there. And one day, there's a fella called God, and he turned up on a Sunday morning, and he sat down there, and he put his deck chair out, and he got a Sunday newspaper, and he picked up, John, a pint of cider. Now, you know, cider, particularly the cider they make on the Welsh borders here, is made in heaven because it tastes just beautiful. It tastes like nectar, and it comes in a pottery cup with a black bottom, so you can't see through it and you can't see into it because it's green and it's got bits in it. And he was sat there on Sunday morning, and he was sat there because he'd been working very hard for the last week, because he created the whole of the world. and everything. As the Bible said, he created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he was sat there in the place that he thought was closest to heaven, which is Shropshire, where I live. Now, just as he was sat there and he was turning over the local newspaper and drinking his cider, a little grey thing flew across. And it had wings, but it didn't have a beak and it didn't have any legs. And it was just flying around all over. And he said, he said, come here. And this little thing, and it landed right on the palm of his hand. And he said, what are you? And the little thing went, and he looked at it and said, where are your legs? And he went, And God went, well, I created the birds and all the things that lived and all the forests and the jungles and everything else. That was Wednesday morning. And he went, hang on a minute. So he put it around. So he went into his heaven at the back, and at the back there was a great big basket of beaks. There was a great big basket of legs, and there was all these paint cans. And he said, he said, I forgot to give the birds their beaks and their legs, and I've forgotten to paint them. And he brought them all out, and he sat there, and he picked up this little bird, and he gave him a little beak, and he gave him 2 legs, and the little bird went, hello. He said, I can speak now. And he goes, yeah, that's right. He said, so what am I? He said, well, I'm going to call you a Robin Redbreast. And he picked up the red from his paint and he painted a great big redbreast on the front of him. And then he put a bit of brown. He said, go and get all the other birds. You go and chat all over the Celtic forests and everything, and bring all the birds to me, because I haven't painted the birds. And I haven't given them their beaks and I haven't given them their legs. And the little robin went, and off he went. And suddenly, just round, all the birds from all the Celtic forests were somewhere. Well, the first thing he did was there were tits. So there was a great tit, and there was a little tit, and there was the bull tit, and there was the marsh tit, and there was another little willow tit, and he painted them all the same, but all slightly different. And then all the sparrows turned up, and then all the starlings turned up, and he just sat there, and he started painting everyone. He'd hop up, and he'd start painting them off and say, go and get all the others and come back. And suddenly, everybody was there, and there was a great big long queue. And God, he was getting quite artistic, and he got one of those palettes out, that the artists have got with a paintbrush. And he got himself a little stand there, and he got all his paints, and he looked round, and Baba, because somebody asked this question a moment ago, it was the king of all the birds. The king of all the birds came flying down, and he was a great big golden eagle. And he flew down there and he stood up, and he didn't wait in any queue. He was a bit like the French at Disneyland. He just hopped straight to the front and he went, I am all the king of the birds, you paint me now. And God went, oh, are you? He said. And God picked him up by his neck and put him over, and he put him on the stand, and he put the gold paint, and he put all the gold paint over it and said, you are the king of the birds, go and get the queen of the birds. But if you look at the golden eagle, just at the back of his neck, there's a couple of feathers that stick out and are short and crumpled. And that's where God picked him up and stuck him on there. And then the queen of all the birds came back. Now, I want to ask a question of who the queen of all the birds is, but you will all know, so I'm looking at you, because the lady swan came down. And she came down, and she's not very good at landing things. The swans aren't, because they run as they land, but she landed and they ran, and all the other birds, they all sat back. And she ran, and she just got it time, and she hopped. And God, he sat down, and they had a cup of tea, because she's the queen of all the birds, and everybody waited because she was elderly now. And they had a piece of cake and a cup of tea, and they sat and they chatted, and he painted her white with a yellow beak. And she, just as she finished, she said, she said, when we go to sleep, we curl our necks so they're the same size, and we touch each other, and we just float around on the lake. But I don't have to worry, because in the middle of the night, I'll always know that he's there. And then there was all the other birds, and there was the tree creepers, and there was the nuthatches, and there was every other bird that you can think of, the Celtic. Now I could stay here, and I have done, because when I first learned this story from Duncan Williams, and we spent all night painting every bird. And we had a wonderful time. And the woodpeckers and all sorts of stuff. But they went down to the River Severn. And from the River Severn, there was a gull that had come up, a seagull that had come up all the way from Chepstow, all the way down past Bristol. And he got his colours, and God said, go out to the seas, go out to all the coastal birds and send them here to Much Wenlock, and then go across all the seas and send all the birds from everywhere. And that's what the gull did. And suddenly there was a queue there, and the queue was as long from the top of the Wenlock Edge down to Church Stretton and back again. And everybody was waiting, and everybody was quiet. And there was God, and he was painting each bird, and he named the bird, and he gave them the beak, and he gave them 2 legs. And everyone was happy. And everyone went back to their friends and said, this is the colours we are. And that's the colours they stayed to be. And then the birds from the coasts came up. Well, then first from the river, the cormorants and that, and then the seagulls and all the things that live around the coast, and all the birds and all the oceans. And the very last thing was the albatross. And the albatross came in and said, you have to wait for just for 5 minutes because there's a few more to come. And God said, I can stay here all day. That's not a problem at all. Which ones haven't we done? He said, there's all the ones that the penguins, and they're walking. And they're walking as fast as they can. There's the king penguin and the little penguin. But you've got to wait for all the birds that come from the jungles of Africa. For there's the canaries and the budgerigars. And there's all the brightly coloured ones. Well, God loved painting them. He was getting really artistic. There were bright colours, and there's the cockatool and the cockatiel and all the other birds that are flying around. And he loved painting them. And in the end, there was just one bird left. And it was that albatross. And he painted him, and he said, right, you at the end. And he sat down there and he went, everything's finished. I've painted all the birds. And just as he was nodding up, because he'd had a hard day, and drinking cider and working very hard, another little bird hopped up into his left hand. And it was a grey, nondescript little bird. And it didn't have a beak, and it didn't have any legs. And God said, I don't think I've got anything left. And he went back into his heaven. And sure enough, there in the back of the heaven was one little beak and one set of legs that had been put on a shelf for a really special little bird. And he came out and said, you must be the last one, so this is yours. For it's just a grey beak and a grey pair of legs. And the little bird said, please, please, can you just give me some colours? I just don't want to be a grey, nondescript bird for the whole of my life. And God said, well, I tried to do. I would try, but I'll go and have a look. And he went through his paint cans, but all the paint cans were dry. There was no wet paint at all. He tried every colour. He tried heating them up. He tried blowing on them and something. He couldn't get any colour at all. And then he started going through his paintbrushes. As he went through his paintbrushes, they were all dry as well. And in the end, he picked up the very last paintbrush. And there, that was the paintbrush he painted the golden eagle with. And he just looked down, because he'd done it so quickly, and he'd done it because he was a little bit annoyed with the king of all the birds. And there was a tiny, tiny little bit of gold. And he just picked it up, and he came down, and he got the smallest paintbrush he'd got, and he picked up the little bird and said, put your throat backwards and open your mouth. And the little bird put his throat backwards and opened his mouth, and it bent its head backwards. And God used the last bit of paint he had to paint the throat of that little bird. And that little bird you may have heard of. There's people here from foreign lands, but we have it in this country. And we have some in Shropshire. And it is a tiny little nondescript bird that if you saw it, you'd dismiss it completely. But the nightingale has the nicest of all the songs. And that's how the nightingale got to have its magical song. The story of the birds. Now, like I said, if you can certainly take that story and tell it. If you tell it to schools, you just think of the names of the birds. Why there's always 4 birds that are always the first ones in to get them out of the way, and you can spend as long as you like about it. But be warned, there's always somebody will come up with a bird that will say, what does that one look like? So make sure you know your stuff. Right. It's lovely to tell that one again. I haven't told it for ages and ages and ages, and this session is really lovely. So I'm going to go John, Valentina, Phil, Janet. So John, I'm going to you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for that story. Beautiful. Because I didn't get back home to have my top hat, I went through my car and found my Texas hat here. I got this at Kerrville Folk Festival, which is in the hill country in Texas, in a place called the Quiet Valley Ranch. They do nothing else there but have a festival and a wine festival, a wine and music festival. That's all that happens. And they call it an RV park, but that just means is just
sounds
stay
ideal
there all
tonight,
year.
though.
And so anyway, I've worked it a few times and just crewed and on Breakfast Crew. And one wonderful thing about being on Breakfast Crew is you meet absolutely everyone at the festival because you're serving them food. And at the end of the day, everyone will get to know you. And there was this wonderful woman that used to go to the festival called Dee Dee. And she was a Native American woman that was going around on a wheelchair around this, and it's a really rough road. And she'd say, John, go and get my. You know, there's some people you just don't say no to, and so I go and so I'd bring her a food, and she'd tell me stories. Or she'd be all. Sometimes it'd just be a one-liner. You know, she'd look at a dream catcher that all the sort of hippie stalls were selling. She said, "Mighty purty, and nothing to do with my culture, but it's mighty purty." And she told me this one. She used to be a big executive in Houston, and she used to occasionally just wear her feathers into the boardroom just to annoy him. And it came to a point where the state around Houston, and to do it, they were going to have to buy up all the land, including some railway land, and so. They said, and it was a public holiday, and they really needed to get this deal done incredibly fast. And they said, Dee Dee, can you do it? She said, yeah, not a problem. She said, I'll start my own company. I'll call it PFPBT, and if I say I need so many million, I don't want any questions. You just give me that money. They said, they offered yes. So, but do you need any help? She said, no, I'll do it all myself. Well, come the next week, everything was done and dusted, and they were in the boardroom, and people were just, they were over the moon. It was they thought they didn't think it was possible, but and they're all shaking a hand, going, "Good job, Dee Dee, good job." Until the head of Union Pacific Railways came up to her and said, "Great job, Dee Dee, great job, but tell me, there's one thing really confuses me. What does PFPBT stand for?" She said, "Pale face payback time. Have you any idea how satisfying it is for an Indian to close a railway?" So, and I'll just leave you with that little snippet.
Right, I'm going to go. It's Valentina is to come next. We did have a Phil here, but she seems to have disappeared. So we're going to go Valentina, then of course that would be you, Janet, next after that. Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, because I was muted. Hi, this is only the second time I'm here. I'm here from Canada. And right now, our province is in a terrible way with the COVID. It's heaviest it's ever been with infections. Our hospitals are very close to full. We're not as bad as India, but for Canada, it's pretty dire. And so what they're doing is trying to target hotspots where people work and factories and things. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's what inspired the story. I told this story last week at my local group, and since I was invited to tell today, I thought I can do this. I'll tell this story again. And what made me think of it is they were talking about who's designated as an essential worker. I mean, we all know the people that are obvious, like your nurses, your doctors, your grocery store workers, and we don't see the delivery people, but we're aware of them. And yet there's so many more. Like when you go into a grocery store and you pick up your, milk that's in a plastic bag, you don't see the person who brought it or processed it the way we used to when I was a child. And my parents would be considered essential workers today. So I'm going to tell a story that I used to listen to my mother and her friends talk because I am visually impaired. And so my parents didn't allow me just to run around like the other kids did. I used to, they were worried about me running around, and I had to have someone to play with and whatever each time I went out. That wasn't always possible. So I spent a lot of time, excuse me, my phone is ringing, but I don't want to go get it. Anyway, so I spent a lot of time listening to them talk, and their stories greatly influenced how I think, and I write and tell a lot of their stories. So my parents both worked in the meat processing plants in Hamilton, which is a big city in the shadow of Toronto. And my mother always tried to do the more difficult jobs because you got paid more. And those were the days where there were no unions. It was all piecework. And the rules, and especially safety rules, were pretty lax. Anyway, she figured out that if she worked in the afternoons when they processed wieners, and that's one of the big American, Canadian go-to. If you want a fast lunch, you just throw some wieners on the grill and you broil them up for your kids for lunch, put them in a bun, and all the kids like hot dogs here, and they're very popular. We use them a lot, and our gentleman from the United States can attest to that too. It's one of the go-to things. And so my mother decided that she's going to work afternoons and get the premium pay, which was 10 cents an hour extra. And at that time, if you wanted to know what 10 cents an hour could buy you, it meant an extra loaf of bread. And with 4 or 5, 6 children, that made a big deal to her, of difference to her. So she worked in this meat packing plant, and where there's humanity, there's relationship, and she made friends. And so there was a lady that we used to call Auntie Mary, and she came to Canada by way of Britain. She was also a displaced person, and the two of them became very good friends. So they worked in this meat packing plant, and they partnered up. They were part of the Ukrainian gang, because also in those days, if you came from Italy, you were assigned to the Italian gang. If you came from France, you went with the French girls. If you were Ukrainian, you worked with the Ukrainian girls, and that was standard practice. It was just easier because people didn't have to learn English right away, but they could work right away because they could communicate. And so this lady and my mother worked for a while, and they figured out by accident that if you pushed a certain switch, their machine would go faster than the rest of the assembly line. And what they did on the assembly line was to weigh the finished wieners, and the machine weighed them and set them out onto the plastic before they were vacuum sealed. So she and her friend Auntie Mary would work in the first half of the shift, set the machine on double speed, let it pile up, and then in the second half they'd relax, because when they got home they'd have to go and work anyway and look after their kids. They had jobs to do. And this was happening for a while, and the boss noticed. And this boss was a very arrogant man, and he really, wanted to know, because if he could figure that out, then he could set up the rest of the line, and the whole thing would go faster. They could set it up. And, when you've got 20 people working in a big operation, the room was 30 meters long, you can imagine that you could, if you made it all go faster, it would mean a lot more money for the company. But no matter what he did, he could not convince my mother to tell him about this little switch that was on the inside of the machine. And she would just say to him, when you pay me as much as you earn, I'll tell you, because you're the boss, you should know how to work your machines. And it was quite a joke for her and Auntie Mary. But as things happen, and a joke can go on for so long, it gets stale. Now, this boss got quite upset that they would not tell him what happened. So he'd start to do things to sort of sabotage and slow the line down. Like he would tell my mother, oh, we have to reweigh this. You look like you were sleeping on your feet. I didn't see you looking at the machine. So he sent half the work that they did back to be redone. And my mother wasn't happy about this, but, he still kept bothering her, like, how do you make it go fast? And when she felt like it, she'd make the machine go fast, and then she'd have time to rest so that, the rest of the line could catch up. Now, it so happened that a new lady came to work with them, and she was assigned to the Ukrainian group, but she couldn't speak a word of Ukrainian. She was actually a Canadian girl whose husband had passed away, and she needed to go to work and had never worked. And so she was put in with the Ukrainian girls, and she hadn't ever worked in a factory, hadn't done anything physical ever except keep a home. So she was having a hard time. And so the boss thought, well, if these two Ukrainian girls are so smart, I'm going to assign her to that gang and she'll slow them down and blah, blah, blah. So there was more tension, and it became to be a quite difficult situation. And whenever something went wrong, this boss would pick on this Canadian girl. And in the end, they got written up, and my mother always felt protective of people who couldn't, she was the underdog. I mean, she'd lived through a famine and a war, so she knew how to stand up for herself. But this girl was really having troubles. And in the end, she was written up to be let go. But my mother decided that she was pregnant anyway. So when the girl got her papers to be fired, my mother scratched out Kathy's name and put her name in instead, because she was going to be having a child soon anyway and be pregnant. And she let Kathy stay in her place to work with Auntie Mary, who actually helped her out, and she was able to keep her job. But my mother went home to have her baby. And the point of telling this story is, it doesn't matter what people do, whether they're visible or not, there's a pair of hands, there's a life behind everything that we need and buy and do. And I just thought that this would be a nice time to remind people of that and personalize some of the things that we take for granted, like going into a grocery store and just picking up any old package and, being aware that there is a lot of humanity behind groceries and our own personal needs. Thank you.
Well done. Yeah. I just think, Valentina, that everybody's essential. That everybody has a reason to be here. And there's nobody more essential or less essential. We're all essential. But somebody has to prioritize this and that and other, and it's not a job I would like. But there is an old story that comes from the Highlands of Scotland. And there was a teacher there he turned around and said, what I want you to do is to bring something tomorrow morning that shines. And the old word for shines in the old English language is glistens. And she said, bring something that shines or glistens. They all went out to play and everything else, and they all came back in, and everybody came in and they'd all found something to shine, like the boots or buttons or a brooch and everything else. But there was one little girl and she was sat in the corner. And in the end, the teacher said, what have you got for me, Deirdre? And Deirdre said, I've got nothing at all. And she walked to the front of the class and said, I know I'm going to get into trouble, but I had a little dog. And my little dog was sick last night and we had to take it to the vets, and the vets, they did everything they could. But in this morning, she's passed on like all the other people pass on from time to time. And as she was telling the story, a tear came from her eye. And the tear landed on the desk of the teacher. And the teacher looked round and looked and said, do you know what the thing is that glistens the most? It's the teardrop of pity. And there's a teardrop of pity here on my desk. So Deirdre today has won our competition.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Lovely.
That was
We're
beautiful.
going to go to Janitor, I think.
May I interject just briefly?
Yes.
I'll keep it very quick. I just want to thank I just wanted Valentina to know that this American truly appreciates his Canadian, his northern neighbor. I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We
Now,
love you,
going back to what I was
Americans,
saying earlier, Baba, what is ours, what was ours, and what should have been ours?
See, that actually, Canada played a very important part in the Underground Railroad because when they start passing all those crazy laws in the States, a lot of the would-be emancipated people, they would shake the lion's paw because England and its colonies had outlawed slavery way before before the United States got to it.
Yeah.
So they would run up into Canada and shake the lion's paw and be free.
Well,
But I truly appreciate you.
everybody picks on us, but we did some good around the place. But I'd like to mention before we go to Janet, we have lost someone who was dear to us because we lost the old Duke this time. And I don't know if
Oh,
you
that was so sad. Oh my goodness. I cried all the way through
Yeah.
the funeral. I really did. And it felt so
But,
much
I
of a
will.
loss.
There's loads and loads of stories about the old Duke, but I'm going to tell this one because it was him who refurbished the Land Rover that he made his last journey on, and that Land Rover was an electric one. I don't know if you fellas know, but the engine is an electric one. And they put him on the
No.
back, and what amused him the most was the people that had helped him design it and build it had all died before he did.
I
And
didn't know
so
that.
his last words, as Charlie Boy and Anne were walking down behind their dad and everything, so they were going, you know, everybody, he invented that about 20 years ago for his last journey, and they'd all bloody died of it, and he was the last one of them all. Anyway, Janet, we are prattling on and it's coming to you, and it's lovely to see you here again, and I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I have to smile about the Duke's Land Rover because I live in Staffordshire, so we are very closely connected with the auto trade in the West Midlands, and I have many relatives who are connected, and so a lot of them were smiling rather than tears at that particular funeral, however, so on. And your tale of the teardrop, yes, little lump there. But Bubba was saying that he wasn't quite sure if the story that he told originated from Nigeria or Ghana. Well, I believe that the story I'm about to tell is from Africa, but I believe it's from Benin. But you can hear it anywhere that was connected with the Atlantic Triangle trade, the slave trade, because I know that it pops up anywhere that's connected in the way that stories are carried slowly, sometimes reluctantly, but they are carried around the world. So, and Mike, it's a story about God. So, but not God in Shropshire. God in Benin. And everybody knows that God created the world and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. So whenever anybody would look up into the sky and see the rainbow, oh, they would praise God. And when the rains came after the dry season, they would thank God. And God was wonderful, perfect. And do we really believe that God created everything? No, 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 no. No, the people of Benin know that this isn't true. The people of Benin know that he had an assistant, and the assistant was known as Legba. And Legba, I can see Baba nodding, Legba was his assistant, but he was not credited with all the beautiful things. For if you stubbed your toe on a rock, that was Legba making mischief. If the fishing wasn't good, that was Legba's fault. Everything that went wrong, everything that wasn't quite right, that was Legba's fault. Now, you can imagine that after a while, Legba became somewhat disgruntled about this. Why do I always get the blame? You know, he said to God one day, I heard a child being threatened by its mother. If you do not behave, Legba will come in the night. Legba will steal you away from your bed. You must behave because Legba will come. Well, that was the last straw. So Legba took himself to God's house, and there in the garden, God was tending his yams. Now, you must realize by now that God lives on earth with his people, and the earth itself pleased him, and he loved to grow yams. And I don't mean the yams which are the sweet potatoes that we eat. I mean the big purple yams that grow on the vines. You can make desserts from these. They have glossy leaves, and the yams, they're not huge, but God's were, and they were shiny, and they were wonderful, and God cared for his yams. In the garden, Legba said to God, you know, God, I'm not happy about being blamed for all the bad things. Can't you do something about this? God said, well, not really. I mean, after all, we want the people to think that I, God, that I'm perfect, that I've created a perfect world. Somebody's got to take the blame. And it just happens to be you, Legba. He turned around and walked into his house. Legba was not happy. He began to make a plan. He called to God and said, moment, God, I just thought I ought to warn you that somebody, I heard a little tale, somebody is going to enter your garden and steal your yams. My yams? God, steal my, no. Nobody steals my yams. Nobody steals my yams. Nobody touches my yams. In fact, Legba, you can call all the people to the front of my house. You can gather them around in a square, and I will deal with it. I want them there 6 o'clock this evening. So it was Legba's task to gather people from whatever they were doing, whether they were at school, whether they were at the market, whether they were in the field or the factory, wherever they were, to gather outside God's house at 6 o'clock, just before the sun drops below the horizon. And God shouted, I have heard that somebody is going to steal my yams. Well, nobody had ever heard God raise his voice before. And they began to shake. The children hid behind their mother's skirts. The young men put their arms around their new wives and said, just take care. So going to be okay. But God continued, if this happens, and I discover the culprit, and believe me, I will, that person will have to leave the earth. Well, that night, the sun went down and people went into their homes, and there were children pulling the sheets over their head. There were mothers rocking a baby and wondering what on earth was going to happen. There were people who were thinking, well, it's not me. I'm not going to steal God's yams, so I won't have to leave the earth, but somebody will. Wonder who it will be. Nobody slept well that night. Oh, that's not true, because God slept well. God was in his bed snoring because he was quite convinced that nobody would defy him. There was another person not sleeping, and that was Legba. Now, Legba, when he was quite certain that there wasn't even the fluttering of a bat to be heard, quietly crept onto the veranda of God's house. He lay down on his front and he wriggled across the floor under God's bed. And there he took the pair of sandals that God had taken off. He left his own beside the bed, and carefully he went through God's house and into his garden. And he strapped on God's sandals onto his own feet. He tied them on carefully because they were very large, far too large for Legba. They flopped about a bit, but he managed. And he went into the garden where the ground was just moist with that nighttime dew. And he walked around the garden, taking a yam here and a yam there, the biggest and best yams. In fact, almost every single yam in the garden he took and he hid. Where did he hide them? No one ever found out, but he hid them. And then he went back into God's house where God was still snoring. I'm not going to snore like God. I would only do a tiny imitation, but it was thunderous snoring. So God did not hear anything. He didn't hear his own sandals being slipped back under the bed and Legba taking his out and putting them on when he got outside. In the morning, God woke up. He'd had a really good night's sleep. But I thought, yes, I will check my yams just in case. And he did. He outside, he went, opened the door. Yams! Where are my yams? He was furious. No yams anywhere. He turned around, he turned right around outside, back into the square outside his house, and he yelled, Legba! And Legba, well, he feigned surprise, but he feigned very well, for God said, you get everybody into the square. I want to know who stole my yams. And so, once again, all the people gathered in the square, still shaking, trembling, some people rubbing their eyes, some people just, you know, when that fear grasps just at the pit of your stomach. They were terrified, for there was God shouting again, I will find the thief. In the garden, there were footprints. So, you all line up. And we'll see whose foot fits the print. And the father said, well, just a minute. The children are not going to be the thieves, are they? I mean, we can see these footprints. We can see that they're quite large. Surely the children, of course, said God, send the children off to play. And so the children went off to play. But the mothers, the grandmothers, all the women had to line up, smallest first to the tallest. And each one put their foot beside the footprint. Of course, there was not a single footprint that matched. Not even the greatest, largest woman had a foot that size. Well, off you go. Go and sort your children out. So off went the women, still shaking, looking over their shoulders, wondering who it was. And it was the turn of the men. Smallest at the front, largest at the back, each put their foot beside the print. Not one, not even the tallest, widest, broadest man had the biggest foot to fit the print. I don't know what to make of this, said God. And one of the men said, well, what about Legba? He's always making mischief. Bet it's his print. And of course, Legba put his foot beside the print. No, even Legba's footprint wasn't that size. At this point, women and the children gathered round because we all love a mystery. We all want it to be solved. And somebody said, well, when did it happen? In the night. In the night. God's been acting oddly. Do you think he's been sleepwalking? Perhaps it's his print. Well, that infuriated God. Me? My yams? Of course not. And he plonked his foot down beside the print, and it was exactly the right size. Could you believe it? Said everybody. Bit of a laugh. No, it's not a bit of a laugh. No, it's not funny. This means we can't trust God anymore. So what's to become of him? And Legba said, well, what did God say? God said that when the culprit was found, that person would have to leave the earth. Oh, said God. Well, in that case, and he looked around, and nobody seemed to be begging him to stay. And I know when I'm not wanted. In fact, I think this is a good time for me to go higher up. And that's what he did. From that moment onwards, he has always lived higher up. However, one thing, just before he went, he did call Legba to him, his assistant, and said, Legba, since I'm not going to be here on earth anymore, I'm going to be higher up. Each day, you will send me a message as to what is going on earth. Okay? And off he went, higher up. And to this day, Legba sends messages to God, and the people of the earth have a great deal more respect for Legba than they have ever had before, for it is entirely up to Legba what he tells God. So be careful. Thank you.
Well, that's a lovely story, and thank you very much. So I think everybody's told a story that wants to be. We've been here for an hour or so. I was wondering, Ali, if you're there, can I do a screen share? Is that possible for you to make this happen? Because I just wanted you to show your picture, because I wanted to show everybody what we've been doing today. Is that for those of you who don't know Babbo and things, in Much Wenlock here, we have a storytelling and poetry festival. And we've been planting trees today to offset the carbon footprint.
Oh,
And I was
awesome.
rather hoping that there would be somebody there who would let me screen share, but I don't think that. Is Ali there? I don't think it's going to happen quite. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll do it next time. John will set it all up. So, anyway, many thanks for you all being here. It's been. We've had some wonderful stories told by some beautiful people. And David, in fortnight's time, I'm expecting you to do that all over again with another story. Okay, my friend? Put your thumb up.
I'm going to announce a few things now, if I might,
Okay, so I'm
David.
now going to hand over to John now, and I'm just going to have 2 minutes to myself. But John, so I'm going to hand back over to you. Is that okay?
Thank you. Well, a round of applause for Mike Russ for keeping us all in order. Thank you. He does this magnificently every 2 weeks, and we've got a really exciting few weeks coming up on the cafe. Tomorrow, I've been so busy putting everything else together. There is no Monday night tomorrow night. Well, there is a Monday night, but not at the cafe. I mean, obviously, I'm not omnipotent. You know, I'm not. I am all powerful, but I can't get rid of Mondays altogether. But Tuesdays will be our young tellers at 5 o'clock UK time. Our under 18 tellers, which is just mind blowing every week. Wednesday, Ian Douglas launches. We've got a book launch of Ian Douglas launching his book of folk tales from the canal. Ian's a boat dweller himself, and narrowboat, and from around the canal, and that's published by the History Press. That's on Wednesday, so that'd be 6 o'clock. Thursday, but I think 7:30. The British Moroccan Society will be on this website. They're meeting, and they usually have an author talking. Friday, Hannah Brailsford and her daughter will be doing the children's show with puppets. Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning, because we do try and include people from across the globe. We have our Connecting the World by Story, but it's open to any storyteller from anywhere in the world, but it's so the storytellers from Asia and Australasia can participate, because that's a good time for them. And then Sunday is a ridiculously busy day, because we've got Colin Irwin doing his CD launch. He's doing CD launches across the web, followed by Rock the Casbah, which is a fundraising thing for the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival, which incidentally, any collections that are done tonight, any donations going, will go to the festival. And if you're watching on Facebook, there should be a link for the festival, which is PayPal me FestiFund 2022. And then there's loads of other stuff, but coming on, because it's really necessary that I give this a bit of a plug early. On May the 10th, David Thompson will be taking over the program. Actually, I shall announce it, but then it's David's program, and it's sort of two worlds in one, and it's done from that perspective of disability, but being cut off from world within our world. And so we're going to be entering that world for one night. I mean, it's only one night, but and I don't know. We haven't put the program together yet because it's David in charge, but that's May the 10th. So we've got loads of good stuff coming up. Mike, I'm going back to you now. You're back in the thing. Can't hear you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it's really exciting. There's all sorts of things moving forward. What's going to happen? I'm very sorry to hear the Canadians being in trouble with the COVID stuff. I get my second vaccination this week. And in the UK, we are just managing to get there. But we've still got 30 million people to vaccinate twice, which if you say it quickly, but in America, from the newscasts that we're getting over here, you vaccinated 100 million people in the last month or so. You are kicking on and getting the job done now. And it's the vaccinations that's going to see us out of here.
And Baba, are you going to become a state? Is Washington going to become a state?
Well, as quietly as
are you going to be their first senator?
that would be interesting. We're already a state of confusion, but we, the vote for statehood. This will probably be the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th attempt. We got our fingers crossed. It passed the House. We don't have representation. We have one non-voting delegate. She's not even called a representative. She's a delegate. She gets a lot done for this city, even though she has no vote. So
you're Washington,
D.C., not to be confused with Washington State.
okay.
A little sidebar: almost every state in the United States has at least one city named Washington. But we are Washington, D.C. And, but we have taxation without representation. And they've done a few things. They've tried to, there was a proposal to cede us back to Maryland. Maryland didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for it. There's just some nasty people who, they don't want us to vote because this is basically a Democratic city. And the Republicans don't want, that would be a shift of power.
Well, I've got an idea for you, Baba. Why don't we make you a shire?
Make me a shire, or make DC a shire?
Yeah, so Washington DC Shire, and then we'll put you back in England. Okay.
We do have a shire. It's called New Hampshire.
No, Washington DC.
I know what you mean.
Okay. And then you can have the Queen and our money.
Yes.
So we'll get rid of the dollars and you can have pounds, okay?
Well, it's been a fantastic night. It's been it's been a quality night, hasn't it, Mike?
It's been lovely. I really
It's been lovely.
it.
Ali, as always, thank you
Yes, thank you,
for
Ali.
driving the bus.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Babasi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure's mine.
Ali, before we
Yeah.
go, can you give Mike a screen share?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, is it possible?
Can I do
Yes, John.
Can I do one now?
I don't know if he heard you.
Yeah,
No, he's there.
Ali, come, Mike, do a screen share now. Is it possible?
Yes, John. One minute.
Okay, go for it.
Tell me when to go for it.
You'll have to tell Mike the instructions.
Okay. He's gone. You can do it now.
You can do it now, Mike.
There. Okay. That's me planting trees. That's John
All right.
doing it. Can you see?
Yes.
Right. That's a hedgerow. We're planting a hedgerow. So we're putting back the trees and back the hedges of England. We're putting back, and they're called green runways, or roadways. So the native birds can go from one end to another. And so there's this great big going on for planting trees, and the festival's doing it to offset its carbon footprint.
So are you hedging your bets?
Absolutely.
I
I haven't heard that.
almost made it.
Well, thank you very much,
Yeah, we're
everyone.
hedging up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba C.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Keep
Okay.
coming back to visitors. Thank you.
I shall.
Absolutely. We look forward.
Keith.
Thank you.
And we look forward to everybody being here. Okay, I'll see you all in a
David.
fortnight's time. Well done, Keith.
All
Thank you
right.
very much. Thank you, Valentina.
Thank
See you, John.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Until the next time, to be continued.
Yep.
To be continued.